The hardest part of building an AI product isn't the model, it's the market. Jessica Randazza Pade, one of today's leading experts in AI commercialization and the head of brand activation and commercialization at Neurable, joins us to share why most AI products fail and how to build ones that don't.
Can I articulate something that is different in my life as a result of the thing that you're doing? If I can't articulate that, if the consumer can't articulate that, then you're selling a vitamin, not a painkiller.
She explains how to close the gap between engineering and adoption, why AI is not a value proposition, and how making technology invisible can become your biggest competitive advantage. Her core message: you have to deliver real value if you want to keep your customers tomorrow. In this episode, you'll learn why AI isn't a value prop and how to build for outcomes, not hype. The 3 traits every product that actually sells has in common. How to align engineering and marketing through user feedback loops. Why cheaper, faster, better is a trap, and empathy is the real moat. And the next frontier in AI is health and personalization. This is episode 46 of the Design of AI podcast. Please rate the show if you find it valuable, as your ratings and comments shape future topics. For more AI strategy and research, subscribe to our newsletter, designofai.substack.com. This episode was hosted by Arpi Dragvi-Guerrero and Brittany Hobbs. Brought to you by PH1 Research, a strategy consultancy specializing in mapping the future of your business and product. Hello, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us today. You've worked at IDEO, Danone, and now Neurable. What is the uncomfortable truth about commercialization that most founders and product teams don't want to hear?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. And thank you so much for having me, Brittany and RP. The thing that I encounter and have encountered in each of those different places is that commercialization is an afterthought, right? So often people think about their product. IDEO is obviously a place that's ruthlessly focused around human-centered design, but that doesn't necessarily mean that design always comes with the idea of how people are going to buy it, how people are going to experience it, what the market looks like, what are the market forces, what does the market share look like, what does pricing look like, what is that play between the two and that handoff to be able to get it into their hands. It's so funny to me how often it isn't even something people think about. And then you have someone like me that comes in that is ruthlessly focused around commercialization, that does ask questions around pricing and promotion and the 4 Ps. And people scratch their head and think, well, like, do we really need to think about that right now? So yeah, I would say that to me is the biggest thing I encounter is huh?
I like that. And I think that especially when we think about the way that product teams or teams in general are thinking about it, there's a lot of talk about use cases. And how would you then, in your role and your experience, find the difference between just thinking about like a use case of what someone might find valuable versus then turning that into commercialization thinking?
I think use cases are important. I do think that there is often a disconnect between the product from the engineering side and then it actually in the hands of someone. And so I think you need to be really clear on those use cases as you're telling the story. How does this fit into my life? How does this make my life better? How does this not make me create some sort of giant workaround in order to incorporate this technology into the things that I'm doing day to day? Can I see a before and after in using your product? And so I think you need to have those as anchor points as you are designing the commercialization strategy to be able to have the conversation with your prospective consumers. But I think that is just a part of the matrix of the bigger commercialization strategy.
All right. Now, fascinating thing is that when we go out and start testing out some of these products and evaluating how people react to them, quite often the assumptions are wrong. A lot of the business leaders, they think, oh, the AI will sell itself. It's breakthrough. People just want better. They always want better, but it's not true. Why have you seen that just trying to sell the technology for technology's sake is the fastest way to fail?
Yeah, I think it comes down to probably 3 things. I sort of described one, but I'll go through them as I think of them. So that clear before and after that I described, right? Can I articulate something that is different in my life as a result of the thing that you're doing? If I can't articulate that, if the consumer can't articulate that, then you're selling a vitamin, not a painkiller. And so you want to position yourself to be a painkiller, kill some sort of pain point I have in my life. And that gets me back to another one of them, which is solving a problem I know I already have, right? I know I already struggle to wake up. I need an alarm clock. That solves my problem, right? So solving a problem that I already know I have so that it can really do something meaningful in my life. Grammarly didn't invent the desire to write well. It made it easier to write well.
But
Yeah.
that problem, just because,
Yeah.
again, if I'm thinking about the founders, they're always thinking, well, they want cheaper, they want faster, and they want better. The irony is those are problems that are quantitative, but they're not qualitative. They're problems that if we chase any of those three factors, we can be cannibalized at any point. And to a user, sometimes the cost or the burden of changing isn't enough to save 3%. How do you
Mhm.
rationalize with some of these founders who are very caught up in the idea that speed is a differentiator?
I think speed is only part of the thing. I think there's something that creates some evergreen nature of your product if you're acutely aligned with the consumer need. So if you really understand your consumer, and that goes back to the thing I was saying about the idea of being human-centered, I'm a hardcore believer in that. I drank the Kool-Aid hard on that. If you really understand your consumer, then you are going to understand their journey and you're going to be able to keep pace or anticipate their needs to be able to design things that are meaningful in their lives.
It's time for our year end survey Professional Success in the Era of AI 2026. So many of you that we speak to confide in us that you're worried about your jobs and how to stay relevant. More importantly, you'll help us shape next year's podcast topics. You can participate at designof.ai. It will only take 5 minutes of your time, but will be incredibly impactful in our understanding of what the era of AI actually looks like right now.
If you do have any more context on how to have that uncomfortable conversation with a founder, I think it would really help because they're so obsessed with these quantitative measures that they miss the mark on what it means in someone's life. Like they think that time is a currency when it's not really.
Are you having conversations with your consumers? What does your beta testing program look like? How often are you checking in with those individuals? What kinds of questions are you asking them? How are you tracking their journey over time? What are you doing about their feedback? How are you creating that into your feedback loop, into your engineering process? Have your engineers talk to people that are actually using the product? What have they heard, right? Because I do think that there's often this walled garden between the commercialization team and the engineering team. And the engineering team, the commercialization team is meant to be the feedback loop and giving it to them. And that ownership probably makes sense. But pulling engineers into it so that they also have a good understanding of what they're designing and how it has a role in people's lives, I think is critical. I would also say, just to go back to your previous question about products that actually work versus those that vanish. The other thing that I think about a lot is making the technology invisible. Don't make me think about the fact that I'm using an AI technology. Let it blend seamlessly into the background. Make it focused on the outcome, not the technology itself, right? Again, going back to what is this doing for my life? Thinking about the outcome. I don't spend time thinking about the LM in Spotify's Discover Weekly.
So, I've done quite a few projects that are talking to users especially in the health space around like digital transformation and how can we create products or how can we integrate them into these workflows in a way that's meaningful. And I would say, especially in healthcare, but across the board, I think companies and employees in particular are really tired of this idea of the overpromise constantly. It's like they're being sold this new solution is magic and it's going to solve everything. And it rarely does. And so there's this, I would constantly hear this fatigue of the promise.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, especially for you, how do you keep marketing and product aligned around proof over that promise?
We have a simple approach at Neurable. Sell what we have, right? Like talk about what we have I get the pleasure of having a lot of conversations with journalists and with companies, OEM partners, and there is a lot of future casting that happens in those conversations. What is this technology going to be able to do? And, I do get caught up in some of that because I am interested in what this technology could do for me in 3 years' time. But for the consumer, I need to solve that pain point right now, right? What is it that you're doing for me today? Don't make me buy a product that I have to keep on the shelf for a year before it actually has some usefulness in my life. I want it to not only help me today, but also help me a year from now. Come back to me a year from now when you have that built into the product and tell me about it, right? So that you're not burdening me with this that might never come to pass.
Great. So let's talk about some of those. Some of the big famous case studies in AI since the hype cycle kind of blew up here is like the AI pin, which came and vanished pretty quickly, very expensive. But you've seen a range of AI products that really have taken off, others that have vanished. What are the patterns that separate the ones that succeed from the ones that just absolutely flop? And I'm partly asking this because it seems like OpenAI gets a pass on anything they do, because usually what they're deploying on the market is not finished, not ready, and definitely not enterprise ready. But it seems like they're using the consumers as a test bed where others just don't have that allowance.
I don't mean to repeat myself, but I do think it goes back to what I said a moment ago, which is those three things. I think it's solve a problem for me that I actually have, right? Make it seamlessly integrated into my life, and then make sure I understand the before and after. Those to me are the three things that I think differentiate. We talk about the AI pen, you're creating a problem I don't have. You're solving a need that isn't something I need. To me, that feels like where you see the differentiation. I do agree that once you have a moat of users, once you have that user moat, you can sort of play with it a little bit more. You can put the Google Glass into the market and it can fail, right? You can experiment a little bit more. You still need to hold yourself, be beholden to that user and be user-centered.
We all know that answer engine optimization has changed how people seek information. We know that Google's dominance over PPC is changing. Are there new pathways for commercializing AI products that you recommend founders and business investigate? And what kind of evaluations do you recommend that they use when they decide what distribution channel to use?
I think there's things that you have to consider now that we weren't considering before. There was a great piece in Wall Street Journal last week that was talking about GEO, could be because people are shopping through AI, right? So they're doing some decision making. They're creating their decision making framework in Claude, in ChatGPT, and whatever. So I think that that's important to be able to boost your GEO because people are going to start shopping that way, right? So that's one thing that we're seeing quite an evolution of today. I do think there's been a lot of changes to how Meta is doing purchasing. So they're actually taking it out of Meta. So you won't be able to shop within Meta anymore. But that is still somewhere people are really learning about your technology. So this social shopping, I think, is here to stay. And TikTok to me feels like a place where everyone is buying everything. But that's been happening for years. I just think it's going to continue to hit a fever pitch for a number of years. I haven't seen anything outside of those things other than, more shopping within picture, right? Or in video. So like the shopping within YouTube, being able to buy directly from it while that video is in motion, shopping from a picture of an influencer, being able to know, and you've seen all of these influencers having shop my look, and you linked out and you can buy their respective things. I think that is going to continue to happen. And I think we're going to see improvements to the technology that allow for you to shop it more seamlessly than it is today.
Okay. So it looks like we've gotten to a point of maturity in this kind of technology. People are starting to understand what it can do, what it can't do. They're starting to see some of the use cases with a little more clarity. What do you believe is going to take off in the next 2 to 3 years? And I'm partly selfishly asking because I see a lot of opportunity in health and physical goods, but where do you see the opportunities?
I think that there's a couple things that aren't getting as much traction today that are going to be different. I'll say one example that I'm particularly passionate about in health, and then another one that I'm personally passionate about in my personal life or in my work life. So one is around AI health coaching. There will be an evolution of AI health coaching that really does take more time to understand me as a person and my individual needs. I don't think we're there to the level of sophistication that I want it to be at today, right? So I want you to look at my Neurable headset and know that I got some really bad sleep last night. I want you to go into my calendar and start giving me reminders when it's time to wind down for sleep to be able to be better the next day. I want you to tell me and fit into my schedule where I need to work out as a result of it based on my past behaviors. I want to be able to understand all of those things. I want you to tell me when there was an insulin spike because of my glucose monitor and my Neurable headset to give me recommendations for things to eat or a link to a DoorDash link of a specific meal that I should be eating as a result of it. Those are the things that I want to see happen in health, that it feels really unique to me, that I think we are probably a year to 3 away from having that sort of full integration. The other thing from my professional and personal life that I'd like to see that is a part and parcel with that is ambient AI assistance, right? Like for me, I feel really lucky to have a great in this journey that does so much for me, right? She thinks about my EA thinks about, the meetings I have and the time that I need in between. She understands the context of me and how I work. She knows meetings that burn me out and gives me like meetings that are like a little bit lighter after the meetings that burn me out. She has figured out how to really nurture and cater to my needs. I'd love to see that same thing happen. And I think it will from an AI assistant perspective that's thinking about all the context of me and also probably incorporating some of my health applications into it to be able to really meet my needs where they are.
I love those. And I've been experimenting with some assistant stuff on my side. And the truth is, as an outside observer, I see so many people trying to compete for that role. And you know more than anyone, you only hire one assistant and everyone else doesn't get the job. So how do we deal with an economy and ecosystem, a founder's journey where the likelihood of success seems to be going down because you're going to be competing more and more on data plays with the big players who have the integrations already sorted out?
This is an oversimplification, so forgive me, but that you do have to sort of have a clearer differentiation, right? Be doing something different for me that feels unique, that is ownable. And we could talk about ownership and the things that I think that you can do to get there. But that's where it really feels like you're going to have a better path to win. I think the other thing around those AI coaches and the AI assistants is understanding those specific examples, is understanding people's tolerance for it to not be perfect. I have a very low tolerance for an AI technology messing up my schedule. I know that about myself because I have a very, very busy life. And so I'm not willing to test out a tool that's going to mess it up. I'm more willing to have a meal that is going to spike my glucose because it sort of misguided me. But the things that are more important to me of living my life day to day, I'm not going to have that tolerance. I would say, to answer that question, maybe a little bit more directly, RP, be able to eliminate the ramp up time of the inevitable screw ups. Give me less screw ups in my life, right? How can you shorten that sort of tech journey to get me straight to the real application so I don't have to wade through the garbage of new technology?
Yeah, we were actually speaking last week with Kwame. He wrote the book Agentics, and he was talking a lot about intent capture. And I think one of the things that I had brought up, and you're for sure bringing up, is this idea of like discontent capture as well. Like, how do we understand people's points at which they're no longer willing to accept what you're offering them and where you lose them? And I think you brought up an interesting point as well about like there are different levers within that one experience where your discontent will be higher or lower in terms of what you're willing to accept as well.
Tried out an email assistant about 6 months ago called Cora, and it was supposed to manage my email, but because there's no way to tell it it's not doing good, I just fired it. That's it. It's gone. Didn't get better, just gone.
I had a similar one. I'm actually completely blanking on the name of it. It was not Quora because I hated it so much. But I was like, you are not doing the thing I thought you would do for me. I actually did go a step further. And I sent a message to the team, the engineering team, to be like, can you do this for me? Nope, we can't. It's on our roadmap. Okay, well, I might come back to you, but I've already forgotten the name of the thing, so I probably won't come back to.
Yeah, they'll email you in like 3 months, so you'll remember.
I hope they do. I hope from a commercialization perspective, I hope that they documented that conversation and tagged me in their system to come back to me to specifically answer that need I had. I hope they do.
Let's go back to what we were talking about a second ago, where, you brought up two really interesting ones around AI health coaching and ambient AI assistance. One of the things that I find really fascinating from a human behavior perspective is, for example, we're all getting much more aware of the steps that we need to live longer, to be healthier, but most people still aren't doing it, right? We're still not taking that leap, or we're not overcoming that. Do you believe that AI soon will be able to help us unlock that longevity and health span by contextualizing those habits for us in a way that we can act on? So some of the examples that you've given were still sort of based in that idea of like calendaring and scheduling, thinking maybe beyond that. Because for me personally, like my ADHD makes me really bad at paying attention to my calendar other than the things that are vibrating in front of me. Have you seen any opportunities to go beyond that kind of current workflow to help us really unlock and contextualize that health data?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know that I've seen it, but I could maybe forecast is you're exactly right, Brittany. We know that longevity is getting good sleep, having a healthy diet, exercising, but we don't do that. I think the power of AI is what I was talking about earlier, is that radical customization at scale, right? So that it is telling Brittany, it is telling RP, it's telling Jessica specifically what we need. Where I see people make, and my background is actually public health, and I thought I wanted to be a registered dietitian for a while. I didn't become one for a myriad of reasons we don't need to go into today, but the place where people make big decisions or changes around their health is when something significant happens. They have some sort of scare, right? I think about my cousin who had a cancer scare, and I wouldn't call him grossly unhealthy before, but he is crazy about his health today. And so I think those moments where we have those unlocks are going to be the moments where we're more receptive to the technology and the role that the technology has. I think, we are going to see technology preying on those moments, right? Because AI will be integrated into our health. We will be getting more interceptions from us searching for things or having things. I actually had a cancer scare a couple months ago. I don't have it, thank goodness. But I will tell you, even as a very health conscious person, I have changed a lot of my behaviors as a result of it. And I've been open to what technology has been willing to bring me. I signed up for Function Health. I did all of these sort of things just to be able to see a better ecosystem of my health surrounding it. But I think it's a good question. I am curious to see what evolves. From a Neurable perspective, one of the things we are going to be doing is not only the scheduling piece of it, but also allowing for there to be better recommendations that are real for your life, right? So you can understand so much about your life from like cognitive context. You're still going to have to integrate with the technology in the short term until it's sort of reading your entire ecosystem to be able to give you those recommendations. But it's still up to you, Brittany, to make the decision to do it. And I hope it always is your decision to do it. I hope you always have free will to do it. So, yeah.
Force me to be healthy. I think for the past couple of years, it's been becoming increasingly more important, this idea of around health and how do we do that. And I also had, not personally a cancer scare, but I had a dear friend who was told that he was too healthy to have anything wrong and was diagnosed stage 4 and died 4 months later this summer.
I'm
And so
so,
for me,
so sorry.
yeah, I mean, I'm more sorry for his family. For me, it just became this really pressing idea that we have so much data, we have so much control, but we still give it away constantly. And so how can we be doing better for ourselves? And so especially the last couple of months, I've really been exploring how can we use AI, especially for women in their 40s and 50s, because we're at this point where we are strong and we are being faced down with this faceless thing of perimenopause and menopause. And how can we become peak performers at our strongest point in life, right? And ADHD is another major undiagnosed factor that women in their 40s and 50s right now are the highest rate of ADHD diagnosis right now. I'd love to hear from you. What are you seeing as opportunities or blind spots in designing AI around women's specific physiology and needs and bringing a lot of that research that has been underrepresented to the forefront with this level of data that we have now?
I love this question. I think so much about this question. It is a tragedy how underserved women are in the health market. And that has been historically true for forever, that we haven't had the clinical studies, that we have been underrepresented, that a lot of the protections that exist and the designs that exist in the universe are tailored towards men. We know that, right? It's something we talked about a lot at IDEO actually, is seatbelts are designed for men. And I have a wrist rest and all of the wrist rests are designed for men. And so they're all uncomfortable. When I think about the opportunity that is at play, I think about, let's just use Alzheimer's as an example, because I think a lot about Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is 2 times more likely to happen to women than breast cancer.
Two-thirds of all Alzheimer's patients,
that was what I was
are
about to say.
women, which is
That's
insane.
exactly what I was about to say. 2/3
Yeah.
of all women, all Alzheimer's patients are women. Women during perimenopause, that same time period for men, women lose 30% of their cognitive health during that time. Now, some of it comes back, but 30% degradation in their cognitive speed and cognitive well-being during that same time for women versus men. And yet, women are diagnosed later and typically have the disease earlier. So when I think about the opportunities, I think about the ability to diagnose earlier, to have better interventions for women, right? So that's something I'm really passionate about at Neurable, is we have this headset that I'm wearing right now that tracks my brain and my brain health in the background so I don't have to think about it, and gives me an update if there are anomalies in my brain health so I can look into it. The same with like an HRV for Apple Watch. So that's important to me because I come from a family of dementia. I come from a family who has, my great aunt had Alzheimer's. So I think about it a lot. That's one opportunity. I also think that there's going to be an opportunity, I hope, to jump over the lack of clinical trials, right? To be able to leapfrog some of that lack that we've had in women's health. I think one of the blind spots is that AI health products today look for stability. They look for patterns and trends. And I think if we're using 30 to 50 as the marker, if we're using perimenopause, menopause as the marker, that is a very volatile time in women's health. And so because it's so understudied, I think we're going to need to catch up to better understand those volatilities and what they mean, and the individual cases of so many women, to be able to figure that out, to be able to build the biomarkers to understand it better. I'm hopeful AI will do that, but I think it's going to take some time.
We're probably going to look back at this period more as the data revolution, because that's what AI is good at. It's good at collecting ambient, passive, and active pieces of information and compiling them. But as we're talking about health, what the general population is uncovering is that traditionally health was looked at from the perspective of averages, and this helped to standardize treatments and perspectives and insights gathering. But now we can dive into very bespoke micro segments, and it's really transforming how we look at solutions in our own lives. But if you were to advise founders about how to use this data revolution, how could you help them look at data in a new way and help them interpret that just a 90-degree shift in perspective can actually open up an entirely new market, because you can just go into a niche vertical or go horizontal with new integrations. What is your kind of approach with that commercialization strategy?
It goes back to something we were talking about earlier. I do think you need to get really disciplined about your quantitative data and look at it from different and modules and slice it differently, ask different sets of questions of the data. But I also think you have to have that qualitative data overlay that I think is often misrepresented or missing, right? So, one of the things that we do, so anyone that uses the Neurable technology opts into sharing their data and the full stop, right? You opt in and then it's anonymized and we use it just to improve the technology. And one of the things that we use with the data to improve our technology is not just looking at the EEG and figuring out what we can sort of talk better with the AI technology that boosts the brain signal. We have to have the comments for context in order to understand what's going on. And I was just actually at a conference, a neurotechnology conference, where we were talking about, is brain data actually helpful in and of itself, right? Should we protect brain data? And without the context today of the fact that, my cat died 2 weeks ago and my brain data is going to look distinctly different as a result because I'm grieving than it would look normally, you can't do a lot with that. You're just going to see, wait, her anxiety resilience is really low. She's less calm than normal. Like, what is that? Why? And so I think you need to make sure that your technology and your data is allowing you to have a good understanding of the context and the context evolutions of the individuals or the users to be able to do anything with it. Otherwise, in and of itself, it's not helpful. I can't imagine it's that helpful.
Let's think ahead to an experiment to 2030. Feels long, but it's only 5 years away.
That's
Right.
crazy.
So we've talked
That's
about,
crazy.
I know. So we've talked about we're in this data revolution, but without context, it's kind of meaningless, just data for data's sake. So let's imagine that we're at a point where we figured out how to properly have clean data, have context-rich data, and have more of this personalization. Whether that happens in 5 years, who knows? But what types of advancements in overall health do you believe could be possible because of AI if we figure out these structures well enough?
Okay. I haven't really thought through this analogy, so stay with me for a second and see if it lands. I think about the difference of where we are today as eating at Olive Garden. So you have a server, they bring things to you, they can sort of understand, make recommendations to you, but they don't really have a lot of context of you, right? Versus eating at a 3-star Michelin restaurant that might actually do research on you, that might understand you coming into the restaurant, that spends time to understand your dietary restrictions, that evolves for you as you're eating the meal based on the feedback that you're providing throughout that journey, that understands the things you're doing and creates a unique experience for you. That to me feels like where we're going to be. We're going to be going from eating at Olive Gardens to all eating at Alchemist, and that we are going to see that evolution happen where we are getting not only the inputs, these multimodal detection systems, but we're actually getting closed health loop systems. That to me feels like the jump. I don't know if that analogy worked, but I went for it.
It totally works. Don't worry about it. I would also equate it to, I remember trying to go to a new city and find a restaurant and using just Yelp. And you're like, these all get great reviews. And then you go to it and you're like, this is not for me. This was for anyone who is not me.
Yeah, totally. Totally. In New York, there's a place down the street from me, and my husband and I walked by it and we're like, why are there so many people here? And we went in and it was like the farthest thing from our tastes.
Let's talk about contextualization, right? Because it seems like this is a recurring theme in terms of commercialization. I brought up the story where I fired an AI assistant. The thing is, if it would have collected either actively or passively signals that I wasn't using the tool effectively, it would have inferred what was going to happen and could have course adjusted the same way an employee might have. But when we're thinking about commercialization, what is the strategy that you can deploy to ensure that your idea is not only hitting the mark, that it's satisfying people, it's delivering value, that you still have time to pivot if necessary? I'm asking because I'm trying to launch some things myself. Brittany's trying to launch some things herself. And there are so many doubts that plague everything. And it feels like more data isn't helpful. It feels like more data is actually more oppressive in some ways.
It is something we were talking about earlier. I do think you having conversations with your users and getting into the trenches with your users, and then like going back and having a real conversation. Are these the people that should be using our product? Wait, are there outliers? Are different people buying our product than we thought? Why are they buying this product? Like, what is it about it that's working for them? What is not working for them? And having some conversations with, you name the amount that feels meaningful to you, that allows for you to sort of see your different personas in a meaningful way, and ask them if they will become a part of your ongoing beta community to be able to answer some of those questions for you. And I would say, don't be afraid to make some evolutions to your product based on the feedback that you're getting from those people. And then get more feedback, right? After you sort of deploy those differences, continue to get that feedback. We are launching a new product at Neurable tomorrow. It'll be after, maybe weeks ago by the time this comes out. But we talked to a number of our users. I'll just give you the number that we talked to. We talked to about 50 different users, and we asked them sets of questions. We had individual conversations with them. We went through that exercise because we felt like it was important. And they are a pretty good representative of the thousands and thousands of users that we have, because we've looked at their profiles and we understand those individuals and where they sort of like fit into our persona map to be able to give us something that's meaningful. Do I still have some anxiety about tomorrow launching and people hating it? Yes, I do. But we're going to play that out and see how it goes. And we're going to continue to evolve.
Well, I'm sending you all of the positive energy about this. So I think it's going to be good. I feel good about it. So as someone who is working in, that bridge between physical devices and digital services, call it, what do you see as the power of being able to collect that data from the real world through those devices? And how does that really enable more powerful decision-making and delivering value?
Yeah. So the integration of hardware and software, I think, is particularly unique because the hardware integration creates data moats, right? You basically can understand, again, things in context that you might not be able to understand just by the AI application. You get to see the AI playing with real world setting and what happens in sort of those real world settings. And I think it also helps create some interesting and proprietary flywheels that you might not be able to see from just AI technologies as well. Every interaction makes your technology smarter. You have that other application of the hardware and what the hardware means in people's lives. It also, design loves constraints. So it also creates some constraints, right, for the application. And so I think that also helps in you better understanding and improving the technology over time. You get to see behavioral application, sensor data, longitudinal outcomes. All of that sort of allows for you to have a better understanding of people. And I think that strengthens your value proposition to be able to have the overlay of those two things coming together.
So for the last decade, everybody's been going and rushing to build digital products. It's easier. You have direct to consumer capabilities. But now we're hitting the point where it's surprisingly a lot easier to develop physical products. Do you have any advice for founders and teams so they can help understand the complications, but also the possibilities of deploying a physical component to their service?
Easier. I don't know what products you're working on. Still hard. But no, RP, I think it's a great question. I do think it's easier than it probably was several years ago. But there are some real considerations. So if you are used to those software deployment schedules of being able to turn things around in a week or on sprint cycles, right? 2-week sprints, whatever it is that you're doing, I think the hardware timelines are going to shock you. That hardware timelines can kill momentum, right? You're going from that 2-week to 12-month production cycle. I mean, it really depends on the product that you're designing or developing. And if you're going into health technology specifically, there can be even more stringent restrictions, and the FDA is still not moving at the speed of AI, right? So there are so many things that you have to consider when you're building and designing those products at launch. And I think one of the things you have to really think about is your hardware going to be outdated by the time you launch it, which is probably likely. And so you have to think about how to allow for the software that your technology or your hardware is using to be able to update in order to continue to keep pace of the consumer expectation.
Maybe just a ground example is, let's say I wanted to build like an Aura Ring competitor. How long are we talking about is the dev cycle on something like that? And what are the upsides and downsides of creating a physical manifestation of your data business?
I am not sure I can answer that accurately because I haven't tried to build an Aura Ring competitor. But as someone who has built a headphone or the integration of our technology into a headphone, so we are the software component integrating with OEM partners, they can license the technology. And so when we're met with our timelines, we're like, oh, God, really? I mean, I use the 12 months because that's real, right? That's a real timeline. And sometimes we're having conversations with OEM manufacturing partners that are talking about 2028. And you're like, gosh, that's so far away. And so I think, yeah, those timelines can be really jaw-dropping. Now, do I think that our society is going to force those things to bring up to speed? Maybe, but you still are dealing with manufacturing lines with real people in China or wherever you're manufacturing that don't care that you want to have this in 3 months. I mean, sure, give them the money and maybe they'll make it happen. But that's where you're really going to see some of your margins eaten up and trying to like force that into happening. And manufacturing products, something always goes wrong. Many things go wrong. So I think that also is something to consider.
All right. So to wrap us up, what AI tools are you using to improve your health?
Neurable. So I mean that wholeheartedly. I'm a endurance athlete and I do look at my before and after brain health as a part of my training. So that to me is really important. But I also use Garmin. And Garmin's overlay. I think actually Apple Watches have gotten way better than they were when they first launched. So I'm seeing more usefulness for it versus just like answering text messages. I'm actually using Apple Health Kit and I'm sometimes using it on my runs. I used it on speed work this morning because it was particularly helpful to me. Those are things I'm using. I hate rings, so I don't use an Aura, but 8 Sleep is phenomenal.
Great. Yeah, I got an Apple Watch this summer strictly for the health side of it. Read a lot about the different ones and it definitely seems like they're upping their game. But I'm very excited to keep seeing what's happening with Neurable, especially when you launch tomorrow. So what AI tools are you using to improve your professional success?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are probably a lot of the players that everyone is using. So Perplexity, I use Claude for a lot of writing. Claude, to me, I found to do the best writing. Notion, I think there's some great power in Notion. When Canva AI launched, I was like, this is a joke, but it continues to get better. So I'm excited to continue to see their evolution because I have found it to be more powerful and more meaningful. And there's a couple of technologies that my team uses around AI editing for video that they found to be pretty powerful. I'm struggling to think of the names right now. But yeah, those are the things that I find myself going to the most often.
Amazing. And if people want to follow along on your product launches, your thought leadership, anything that you are putting out into the world, what is your preferred place for them to go to?
Sure. Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn. I'd love it. Let's be friends. I feel like LinkedIn is like a party you went to where you can't really remember anyone, but you're like, I think I met them at that party. Yeah. Connect with me, Jessica Randazza Pade on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to. And please follow Neurable any and everywhere. We'd be grateful to have you.
I cannot wait until
Amazing.
we can actually track all our health data. It's going to make these agents so much more powerful. So thank you so much for launching this product.
So much for having me.